brings it out. Oh, not to Mohammed, that off-stump's gone somewhere else. Taken once again by the captain. Oh, that's a good shout. Up goes the finger.
Last time in Star Lab, we broke down the various hardships faced by test bowlers.
Gone. It's all over. End of argument.
On today's edition, we delve into the biggest intangible in cricket as we decode the all-important playing conditions. Cricket is perhaps the only sport in the world where players are at the mercy of playing conditions, and these conditions vary from venue to venue, and they adversely affect the game and of course the players themselves. If the weather is overcast, the cricket ball tends to swing more through the air, making life difficult for batsmen and favouring the fast bowlers.
When the conditions are favouring the bowler, when it's overcast and it starts seaming, however set you are or however good your form is, you always struggle. You look to play close to your body because the bowlers are going to dominate. The ball suddenly starts swinging, there's lateral movement off the wicket.
The toughest part about playing in overseas conditions, in particular in England, is the ability of the ball to be able to not only swing conventionally but also reverse swing. So they're two sort of separate challenges. Plus also how the game can change and vary depending on the overhead conditions. You can find yourself in unbelievable touch with the game progressing exactly how you want it to be, and then all of a sudden the clouds will roll in, the skies will become leaden, and then the ball will start to talk a lot more on the wickets. And you have to really be prepared within your own game to accept the fact that sometimes the ball's going to dominate.
A lot of time in England you get 4 seasons in one day, so when it gets warm and overcast, the ball swings more. You get those early mornings where it can seam a lot more as well. It's all about getting the ball a little bit fuller and making batsmen drive, I think, when it's slightly slower but it's seaming around. So getting the ball fuller and hoping that you get one of those sunny, cloudy days.
So what is it that makes these conditions peculiar to achieving this kind of swing bowling? First is obviously the nature of the pitch, which is grassy and smooth, and that helps the ball to retain its shine for longer. The other important factor is the Duke ball. The Duke ball is only used in England and it has a pronounced seam. Now the seam is responsible for creating the turbulent airflow which actually creates the pressure difference for the ball to swing. As a swing or seam bowler, when you come to English conditions, you may actually get carried away by the amount of swings you can generate. But at the same time, it's very important to focus on the basics of getting your bowling correct. James Anderson's performance in the Headingley Test in 2016 versus Sri Lanka is a classic example of such a performance. Anderson picked up 10 wickets, taking a wicket every 15 balls and averaging only 5 runs per wicket, and he was able to do that by controlling the amount of swing and sticking to his line and length. If you look at his counterpart Eranga from Sri Lanka, who bowled at similar speeds, but his accuracy was not up to the mark and therefore he was only able to pick up 1 wicket. In fact, Eranga swung the ball much more than Anderson did on an average. Therefore, it highlights the importance of actually sticking to your accuracy and just swinging the ball only that much, which can help you get that kind of performance.
English weather conditions might be testing at times as it's hard to keep the body warm and agile.
So when the weather is cold, it's very important to keep your body warm, especially when you're padded up, you're going in to bat next. It's important to do some skipping, some kind of movement so that you're not getting stiff.
My recommendation is just to make sure that you're armed with multiple condition clothing, undergarments which can be warm enough to sustain that sort of cold weather.
For better muscle function and power output, it's very important to stay warm. You can do this through layering your clothing. The first layer should be a fabric that does not hold moisture. And the second layer should be a nice thick warm layer, and the outer layer can be something that's wind resistant or rain resistant.
In countries such as India and Pakistan, where the mercury tends to rise as the sun comes out, conditions tend to favour spinners. The heat causes pitches to dry up and bake. As a result, the ball tends to travel slower but turns viciously.
Oh, close, yes. Joe Wilson says that is.
always feel that as a spinner you would want to err on the fuller side, because what happens is that once it hits the pitch, it tends to break or turn from there. So the farther away you're from the bat, the more the tendency to miss the bat. So it looks good. You might feel that you've got the moral victory over a batsman at beating the bat, but it doesn't give you anything. But sometimes closer it is, it still tends to break, and then you get the edges, you get the leading edges, it goes to different places. So as a spinner, you don't want to be shorter on subcontinental tracks.
In subcontinental conditions, batsmen need to be wary of inconsistent bounce.
Bowling inside edge. Footwork not working this time.
Such conditions can get the better of even the most seasoned batters.
When you're playing in spinning conditions and you're used to growing up in, like I was, on fast bouncy tracks, it's about really muscle memory and spending lots of time looking at the ways that you can score runs in these conditions. So it's not just about survival. I thought when I came to the subcontinent that it was no point in having a survival game. I needed to have a game which was aggressive and to be able to put some pressure on an attack, be that a seam bowling attack or a spinning attack.
Test cricket is very challenging in many ways because not only do cricketers have to concentrate for long durations of time, but they also have to shift between broad and narrow focus. An example of broad focus would be a batsman scanning the field for openings and where to place the ball. An example, on the other hand, for narrow focus would be a batsman focusing in on a bowler's action and how to place or play that ball. So in the Indian subcontinent, narrow focus becomes a priority, where it's important for cricketers to focus the initial bit of their innings to get set and then look at getting adjusted to the variable bounce before looking at scoring big runs.
Bowling in test subcontinental conditions is quite a handful, especially for pace bowlers.
Yeah, different bowlers have different ideas about this. I think for mine it's about dropping your length back a little bit in the subcontinent because you don't get generally the hard, faster pitches. So you're looking for balls that maybe nip around a little bit but do it at a lower rate. So you're bringing LBW into play a lot more than you are perhaps probably the keeper in first and second slip looking for your catches. You're probably bowling straighter, setting slightly more defensive fields, I think, in the subcontinent and looking to wrap guys on the pads with just the odd one that stays a little bit low.
The weather can take a toll on the body, especially for those who are not used to the hot and humid conditions in the subcontinent.
Hydration is massive in India and in the subcontinent as well. You've got to make sure that 2-3 days prior to you're really taking on a lot of water. Guys are generally losing probably 2 and 3 kilograms through the course of a hot day. So your hydration before and hydration afterwards is massively important.
You know, the challenge for playing in really hot climates, thinking of most subcontinental conditions, the first thing is hydration. If you're dehydrated, you lose concentration. And concentration is the key asset to a batsman, and a bowler for that matter as well. So making sure that you're actually able to take on board enough fluid, keeping your core body temperature down. One key that I used here in India was to, when I batted through a session, was to straight away come off and submerge myself in an ice bucket. And that way then just lowering your core temperature down, which enabled you then to be able to take on more fluid, which was absorbed better through your body with a lower body temperature.
In India, the temperatures can reach in the mid-40s with 60 to 70% humidity. This starts a vicious cycle of the body heating up, trying to cool itself through sweating, and then losing water. This vicious cycle causes us to sweat at a rate of 2 liters per hour in India. That means in one day, in India, 12 to 15 liters of sweat could be lost. While in England, it could just be 3 to 4 liters. Even if you lose just 1% of body weight through fluid loss, your bowling accuracy can be reduced by 20%, your sprinting can be reduced, cognitive functioning, hand-eye coordination. These are all affected by not having enough fluids.
Of all the pitches found across the test playing world, the ones in countries like Australia and South Africa are considered to be the best for both batting and bowling. And it is on these wickets where the most even contest between bat and ball unfold. Having said that, batsmen from the subcontinent go in with a telling disadvantage on such fast pitches, as they need time to adjust to the pace and bounce.
For a batsman who's not used to the bouncy conditions, the first and foremost thing which is the most important is judging the length from where there is extra bounce. Because when you're playing in subcontinent conditions where the bounce is not much, maybe the ball which is on length area, good length area, you're required to play. But on those wickets in Australia or South Africa where there is extra bounce, you can leave the balls even though the ball land in the good length area, because those deliveries will go above the wicket. So judging the length from where you can leave the ball will be the key.
When you go to South Africa, Australia, places like that, certain areas like the Gabba, maybe Perth, you've got to put your length a little bit fuller. So when we look at a Hawkeye or a pitch map, the good length sometimes moves a little bit in a place like Australia or South Africa. You have to get it a little bit fuller. You won't get too many LBWs if you bowl that good length, because the ball will generally bounce over top of the stump. So adjust your length. So you might just change your line a touch and move your length up a little bit and set slightly more offside fields as an away swing bowler. That's how I'd be looking at it.
While it is easy to predict the nature of bounce on Australian or South African pitches, it could actually be a double-edged sword. You have to face faster deliveries and face higher amount of bounce as well. Now, bowlers are always aiming at your head and neck region to intimidate you with this kind of bounce. When you're batting in India and facing a bowler bowling at 90 miles an hour, you actually have around 500 milliseconds to face the ball. But in South African conditions, you actually have 450 milliseconds, which means 50 milliseconds lesser time to react to the ball. And although it is only 10% of the overall amount, it could make the difference between swaying away from the ball or getting hit flush on the helmet.
All in all, cricket is probably the only sport in the world where performance depends so heavily on playing conditions. Be it the wide variety of pitches and outfields, or for that matter, different types of weather, cricketers constantly need to adjust and adapt. It's just one of the many quirks of the gentleman's game that makes it all the more difficult and yet so special.